Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The moon was pale above the turrets of Hogwarts, casting long silver fingers. Across the black lake, the castle stood silent at this late hour, its many windows glimmering like sleepy eyes. Beyond its stone walls, however, the night was not still. Deep in the distance, past the edge of the school grounds and into the tangle of shadows that was the Forbidden Forest, something stirred. It began as a low hum, a tremor in the earth, faint and uncertain. Then, like breath through a hollow reed, came a sound that made the owls fall silent in their nests. A howl, high and distant, yet filled with sorrow, so deep it seemed to come from the very heart of the woods. The centaurs turned their heads toward it, ears flicking, eyes dark with knowing. By morning, the story had already spread across the great hall. Students leaned over their porridge bowls, whispering. "Did you hear it last night?" said a third year from Hufflepuff. "They say it wasn't an animal at all, but a ghost." At the staff table, Professor McGonagall's sharp gaze swept the hall. "That will be quite enough talk of ghosts and nonsense," she said crisply. "Eat your breakfast before your classes grow cold." Harry Potter, seated beside her, smiled faintly. The years had been kind to him, though the faintest trace of battle still lingered in his eyes, a look that came from having faced too many shadows. As the new Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, he had grown used to the students' nervous chatter about the forest, but this morning felt different. He had heard it too. Later that day, when the last of the classes had ended and the corridors quieted, Harry made his way to McGonagall's office. She looked up from a pile of parchment as he entered. "You heard it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. McGonagall folded her hands. "Indeed." Professor Longbottom reported strange disturbances among the trees as well. The bough-truckles have fled their nests, and even Hagrid's thestrals refuse to go near the western glade. She paused, her eyes narrowing. "You think it might be something dark?" Harry hesitated. "Dark or old? I don't know yet." The headmistress sighed and rose from her chair. "Then I suppose we'd best find out before panic spreads among the students." That evening, under the soft glow of lantern light, Harry gathered his oldest friends. Hermione arrived first, her hair tied back hastily, her expression sharp with curiosity. "I've been reading about ancient wards placed around the Forbidden Forest," she said, spreading a roll of parchment across the table in the staff room. The founders themselves laid enchantments there, protections to keep certain things contained. Ron, now a seasoned Auror, but still unmistakably Ron, leaned back in his chair. "You mean there's something living in there that's been trapped since the time of the founders? That's comforting." Harry smiled despite himself. "We'll need to investigate, but I don't want to go in alone." "Not this time." They agreed to wait until the weekend when they could search by daylight, but the forest had its own plans. That night, a group of students, curious, daring, and foolish as young wizards often are, decided to follow the whispers that had haunted their dreams. Among them were Albus Potter and Scorpius Malfoy, who had heard from the Centaur's Edge that the forest was calling. Albus had inherited his father's restless heart. Scorpius, though more cautious, was drawn along by loyalty and the thrill of the unknown. "We'll just go to the first clearing," Albus said, holding his wand high. "See what's making the noise. Then we'll come right back." But the deeper they went, the darker it became. The trees grew close, their roots like ancient fingers gripping the earth. Mist pooled low around their feet, and even the usual forest sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirp of insects, faded away. Then through the fog came a flicker of green light. It floated between the trees like a drifting flame. "Lumos," whispered Scorpius, his wand trembling slightly. "Albus, I think we should go back." But Albus was already stepping forward. The green light pulsed, brighter now, revealing the faint outline of something carved into the ground. A circle of runes, glowing faintly beneath moss and roots. "What is it?" Scorpius breathed. "I don't know," Albus murmured, kneeling, "but it looks ancient." He brushed away a layer of dirt, and suddenly the runes flared to life, casting eerie patterns of light across their faces. A low rumble shook the earth beneath them. "Albus, stop," Scorpius cried. But it was too late. The circle split open and a gust of wind roared upward, carrying a voice, a whisper that echoed in both their minds. "You have broken the seal." The forest erupted into sound. Branches snapping, birds screeching, the earth itself trembling. The boys ran, tripping over roots and stones, until they stumbled out of the tree line and collapsed on the grass near Hagrid's hut. When they looked back, the forest was still again, but from deep within, faint green light pulsed like a heartbeat. By morning, Hogwarts was alive with rumor once more. Some said the forest had swallowed a creature whole. Others swore they saw shadows moving just beyond the gates. Harry, upon hearing what had happened, felt a chill settle in his chest. He knew that whatever had been sealed in that forest was never meant to be disturbed. And now, it was awake. Morning mist hung low over the lawns of Hogwarts, veiling the forest in a ghostly shroud. The sun, weak and pale, fought its way through a tangle of clouds, lighting the dew like beads of glass. The castle's stone towers gleamed faintly, unaware that something old and restless now stirred beyond its reach. In the great hall, breakfast chatter dulled as Professor McGonagall rose to speak. Her voice, though calm, carried the edge of unease. "There will be no excursions into the Forbidden Forest," she declared. "No matter what you think you've seen or heard, the situation is being handled." Whispers broke out immediately, but McGonagall's eyes, sharp as ever, cut them short. Still, among the sea of students, Albus Potter sat silent, guilt pressing against his chest like a stone. He and Scorpius had not spoken of the voice they'd heard, though both felt its echo still ringing faintly in their minds. When breakfast ended, Harry's voice called quietly from the doorway. "Albus." "Scorpius." "A word, please." They followed him through the hall and down a narrow passage that led to his office. The shelves were lined with books about defensive magic, strange artifacts, and an old, cracked glass jar that faintly glowed blue within. Harry closed the door behind them and turned. "I know you went into the forest last night." Albus looked up, startled. "How?" "Hagrid found your footprints," Harry said, "and you left the gate half open." He studied them both, his expression grave but not angry. "Tell me exactly what happened." They told him everything, the green light, the circle of runes, the whispering voice. When they finished, Harry said nothing for a long while. His gaze drifted to the window, where the forest loomed dark and still. "You didn't just find an old spell," he said finally. "You woke something. Something that's been bound there for a reason." Scorpius swallowed. Do you think it's dangerous?" Harry's expression tightened. Anything sealed by the founders themselves would not have been bound lightly. By afternoon, Harry had gathered Hermione and Ron once more in the staff room. Hermione spread a collection of old maps and texts across the table, her quill moving briskly. "If we're dealing with a containment seal," she said, "then there must have been a guardian of some sort, an entity bound by magic to protect or suppress what lies beneath." Ron leaned forward. "And if it's not protecting, but being protected from?" Hermione glanced at him. "Then we have a much larger problem." Harry stood, reaching for his wand. "We'll need to see the place ourselves before nightfall." The trio moved through the grounds as dusk began to gather. The wind whispered through the grass, and the forest loomed ahead like a sleeping giant. When they reached the edge, Hagrid was waiting for them, Fang pressed nervously against his leg. "Yeah, sure you want to go in there, Harry?" Hagrid asked, lowering his voice. "The trees have been restless all day. Even the centaurs won't come near." "We have to," Harry said. "Something's been disturbed." Hagrid hesitated, then nodded. "Take care then, and mind the old paths. They're changing again." The forest swallowed them whole. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. Shafts of dying sunlight pierced through the canopy in thin golden beams. No sound came but the distant creak of branches and the soft crunch of leaves beneath their boots. Hermione led the way with her wand alight, muttering detection charms under her breath. "There," she said, after some time, pointing ahead. "Do you see that glow?" A faint pulse of green shimmered through the trees, the same hue Albus and Scorpius had described. They stepped into a small clearing, and the sight before them made all three pause. The ground was split with age, roots curling over an ancient stone circle. Strange runes carved deep and jagged ran across its face, some broken, others pulsing faintly with that unearthly light. "Merlin's beard," Ron whispered. "That's no student prank." Hermione knelt beside the markings, her fingers tracing the carvings without touching. "These symbols, they're older than Hogwarts. They might even predate the founders themselves. But this one," she pointed to a rune shaped like an open eye, "this is a ward of imprisonment." Harry frowned. "So something was trapped here." Hermione nodded. "And now, something has been released." A low wind passed through the clearing, carrying with it the faintest whisper. It seemed almost like a voice too soft to make out, yet filled with emotion, a mournful tone, half warning, half plea. Then the ground trembled. The light within the runes flared brighter for a moment, and Harry raised his wand instinctively. "Protego!" The glow faded again, but the forest seemed to breathe around them, alive, aware. Ron exhaled shakily. "I don't like this, mate." "Neither do I," Harry said. "But we can't leave it alone. Whatever this is, it's awake, and it's trying to communicate." They marked the spot carefully, casting protective wards before retreating. The light flickered once more as they turned away, and in that brief flash, Harry thought he saw the faint outline of a face within the stone, a vast, ancient visage, eyes closed as if in slumber. That night, back in his quarters, Harry sat before the fire long after the castle had gone still. He could not shake the feeling that the forest was watching, Every now and then, the flame seemed to flicker green, though he told himself it was only his imagination. When he finally drifted into uneasy sleep, he dreamed of the forest again. The same clearing, the same circle of runes, but this time the voice spoke clearly. The guardians have fallen. The heart of the forest bleeds. Harry woke with a start, sweat cold on his brow. Outside, a storm had begun to gather, lightning flashing briefly across the sky. He rose and went to the window. From there, he could see the dark expanse of the forbidden forest, and far within its depths, a faint, pulsing green light beat like a heart in the dark. The next morning dawned gray and uneasy. A thin rain misted over the castle roofs, and the sky hung low and heavy. The storm of the night before had passed, but the feeling it left behind had not. Students moved through the corridors in quiet groups, whispering about the strange flickers of green light seen from the upper towers. Even Peeves, who normally filled the halls with mischief, was nowhere to be found. In his classroom, Harry tried to speak of practical defensive charms, but the air was thick with distraction. Albus sat near the back, eyes shadowed from sleeplessness. Scorpius beside him looked no better. The other students kept glancing toward the windows as though they half expected something to peer in from the forest. When class ended, Hermione entered, her expression tight. "Harry," she said softly, "come to the staff room. You need to see this." He followed her at once. On the long oak table lay several small wooden boxes, creatures inside them stirring uneasily. Neville Longbottom stood nearby, his brow furrowed in concern. "These were found near the edge of the grounds," he said. "Pixies, bowtruckles, even a few gnomes. They fled the forest." Harry crouched, watching as a trembling bowtruckle clung to a twig, its tiny eyes wide. "They're terrified," Neville said. "Something's driving them out." Hermione opened one of her books with a rustle. "I've been reading the old archives again. There are references to an ancient spirit tied to the heart of the forbidden forest. A guardian, they called it. The founders are said to have sealed it away when it grew violent, corrupted by a force they could not name." She looked up at Harry. "If that's what Albus and Scorpius have disturbed, we need to contain it before anyone gets hurt," Harry finished. That night, a thick fog rolled across the grounds, blanketing the lawns in silence. The trees loomed like dark sentinels. Harry, Hermione, and Ron set out once more, this time with Neville accompanying them. Each carried a wand raised high, casting silver light through the mist. They moved toward the same clearing, but before they reached it, they found something new. The marks of hooves and claws carved deep into the mud, as though some great creature had passed that way. "Centaur tracks," Neville murmured, kneeling. "But these—" He pointed to another print beside them, deeper, wider. "I've never seen anything like that before." A cold wind stirred the branches overhead. Somewhere far away, a cry echoed, low and drawn out. Not quite animal, not quite human. They pressed on until the faint green glow of the runes came into view once more. This time, the clearing had changed. The ground was cracked, the stone circle broken open like an old wound. Steam rose faintly from the fissures, and the runes pulsed like veins of light. "It's spreading," Hermione whispered. Harry stepped closer, careful not to cross the broken circle. "Can you read them?" "Not all," she said, kneeling beside him. "But this one here—" She brushed away a layer of soil, revealing an ancient inscription. "It speaks of the keeper beneath the roots. It warns that the binding must never be broken, or the forest will rise against its own. Before they could speak further, a sudden tremor shook the ground. The runes blazed, and a wave of energy burst outward, knocking them backward. The trees shuddered as if alive. From within the opened stone came a deep, shivering groan, like a creature waking after centuries of sleep. Harry scrambled to his feet, wand raised. "Protego totalum," he shouted, casting a dome of shimmering light around them as dust and leaves whirled through the clearing. From within the fissure, faintly visible beneath the glowing runes, something moved. It was vast and shadowed, its shape shifting as if made of mist and earth together. A pair of eyes opened within the darkness, pale and luminous. A voice deep as roots and slow as mountains filled the air. "Who breaks the vow of stone?" The sound was not merely heard, it was felt, vibrating through the ground and into their bones. Hermione's voice shook as she replied, "We mean no harm. The seal was broken by accident." The eyes regarded her, ancient and sorrowful. "No accident. The blood of the founders stirs again. The forest remembers its dead." Before they could ask what that meant, the figure faded back into the stone, leaving silence and a sickly green glow behind. Ron exhaled shakily. "What in Merlin's name was that?" "The Keeper," Hermione said softly. "Or what's left of it." Harry looked toward the forest beyond the clearing. The trees seemed to shift subtly, their trunks leaning closer, their branches whispering together in a strange, rustling rhythm. "It's alive," he murmured. "The forest itself is waking." They returned to the castle under a heavy silence. Even the portraits on the walls seemed to watch as they passed. When they reached McGonagall's office, she was already waiting, her face pale but resolute. "I felt it," she said before they spoke. The castle trembled. "What did you find?" Harry told her everything. When he finished, she sat back in her chair and closed her eyes for a long moment. "If the forest is truly stirring, then Hogwarts may no longer be safe. The wards are old. They were never meant to contain a force born of the land itself." Hermione leaned forward. "We can't abandon it. The Keeper wasn't evil, only corrupted. If we can find the source of that corruption, we might restore it." McGonagall's eyes softened, but her tone remained firm. "Do what you must, but take care. There are powers older than even Hogwarts buried in those woods." That night, Harry couldn't sleep. He walked the empty corridors until he found himself in the astronomy tower, the forest sprawling dark and immense below. Clouds drifted past the moon, and far in the distance that same green pulse shimmered like a heartbeat. He thought of Albus, of Scorpius, of how easily youthful curiosity could awaken things better left to legend. He thought, too, of the voice, the sadness in it, as though the creature had once been something noble, now twisted by time. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. It was Albus. "Dad," he said quietly, "I dreamed about it again." The voice said the forest was dying. Harry turned to him, eyes shadowed. "Then we'll find out why," he said, "and we'll set it right." They stood together in silence, father and son, gazing toward the restless dark of the forbidden forest, where the oldest secrets of magic waited, whispering beneath the trees. And deep within, unseen beneath the roots and stones, something vast shifted once more, as though testing the limits of its ancient prison. The heartbeat of the forest grew stronger, and the wind carried a sound that might have been a sigh or a warning. The following day brought no calm to Hogwarts. The sky above remained dull and bruised, a storm threatening though no rain fell. Whispers followed every footstep in the corridors, The portraits murmured among themselves when no one watched. Even the staircases seemed to move with an unease that had nothing to do with their enchantments. By midday, Hagrid came to the castle, his great coat soaked through with mist, his beard tangled from the wind. "Something's wrong out there," he rumbled to Harry, who met him just outside the entrance hall. "The creatures are restless, Harry. The centaurs have gathered near the stream. They're speaking of signs and reckon the forest's losing its heart." "Losing its heart?" Harry asked. "Aye," said Hagrid gravely. "They say the forest's life, its very magic, is bleeding away. Trees dying from the inside, roots turning black. I've never seen the like of it." Harry's thoughts darkened. "The Keeper," he murmured. That evening, he met again with Hermione and Ron in the empty classroom that had become their meeting place. Hermione's table was covered in maps and notes written in a hurried hand. "I've found something," she said, tapping an old parchment. The founders called the creature Sylvanus Custos, the guardian of the green. It was bound by a vow made with the forest itself to protect the creatures within, but something poisoned it. Dark magic, perhaps even before Hogwarts was founded. When it began to destroy what it had sworn to guard, the founders sealed it away. Ron frowned. "So if it's waking now, that poison must still be there." "Exactly," Hermione said. "If we can find the source of that corruption, maybe we can cleanse it." Harry nodded slowly. "We'll need to go deeper this time, farther than we've ever gone." "Then you'll need help," came a familiar voice from the doorway. Albus stood there, pale but determined, Scorpius at his side. "You'll need us. We're the ones who broke the seal." Hermione began to protest, but Harry raised a hand. "They're coming," he said quietly. "They may be the key." Night fell early, the forest waiting like a dark sea at the edge of the world. Lanterns flickered as the small group gathered near Hagrid's hut. Harry, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Albus, and Scorpius. The air felt thicker than before, heavy with a scent like iron and rain. Hagrid handed Harry a small vial filled with glowing silver liquid. "Essence of moonfern," he explained. "The centaurs use it for protection when they walk among angry spirits." Harry nodded his thanks, then turned toward the trees. "Stay close. Whatever happens, don't run." The forest swallowed them in silence. The deeper they went, the more distorted the air became. Shadows rippled as if alive. Whispers followed their steps, faint and urgent. Strange green lights flitted among the branches, vanishing whenever they turned their heads. After an hour's walk, they reached a place where the ground began to slope downward. The air grew cold, and the trees twisted inward. Their trunks blackened as though by fire. A faint hum vibrated in the soil beneath their feet. "There," Hermione whispered, pointing ahead. Through the fog, they saw a faint shimmer, like moonlight reflected on water. They stepped forward and found themselves at the edge of a deep ravine. At its center stood an ancient stone structure half buried in earth, a doorway of carved pillars and runes, its surface cracked with age. The same green light pulsed faintly from within. "The heart of the forest," Neville breathed. "I've never seen this before." They crossed a narrow bridge of roots and vines that groaned beneath their weight. The doorway loomed taller the closer they came, its carvings depicting beasts and trees entwined with runes that burned softly when touched by light. "This must be where the Keeper was imprisoned," Hermione said, her voice hushed. Harry stepped forward, tracing one of the runes with his wand. "It's weakened," he said. "Whatever power held it is fading fast." Before they could act, the ground trembled violently. A rush of wind howled through the ravine, tearing at their cloaks. The door's light flared, blinding for a moment, and then it burst open with a roar like thunder. From within came a torrent of mist, dark, swirling, alive. It spiraled into the air, forming a towering shape. Eyes like molten emeralds opened in the gloom, and a voice, deep and hollow, filled the ravine. "You should not have come." Harry raised his wand. "We don't want to fight. We only want to help you." The mist swirled closer, coalescing into the vague outline of a great creature, part stag, part wolf, part tree, its body woven of bark and shadow. Its voice trembled with fury and sorrow. "Help? The forest bleeds. The roots rot. And yet you come with fire and iron. There is no help left." Hermione stepped forward, her voice steady, though her hand trembled. "You were once the protector of this place. The founders trusted you. Whatever corruption took hold of you, it can be undone." The creature's eyes narrowed. "Their magic bound me. Their betrayal rotted my heart. You are their heirs. You carry their curse." As it spoke, the forest around them began to shift. Vines slithered like serpents across the ground, wrapping around trunks and stones. Branches groaned, bending low as if bowing to the will of the creature. Ron shouted a defensive spell, blasting aside a tangle of vines. Harry raised his wand higher, light blazing from its tip. "If there's still a part of you that remembers what you were," he said, "then listen. The forest doesn't need vengeance. It needs you." For a moment the creature hesitated. The light from Harry's wand flickered against its shadowed form, revealing faint glimpses of something beautiful beneath the darkness, a figure of living wood and silver leaves, once radiant, now scarred. Then came a voice, not the keeper's, but faint and distant, echoing through the trees. "Father." The creature shuddered. The green glow faltered. Albus had stepped forward, the vial of moonfern light glowing in his hands. He held it up like an offering. "Take it," he said softly. "If you can still feel the forest's magic, this will heal you." The shadow leaned closer, the air thick with tension, its vast eyes fixed on Albus, unreadable. Then slowly it reached forward, a hand of smoke and bark touching the vial. The silver light flared, and pain tore through the clearing like a scream. The creature recoiled, thrashing, the green glow in its chest burning brighter and brighter until it seemed the whole forest might catch fire. "No!" Hermione cried. "The darkness is fighting back." Harry grabbed Albus, pulling him clear as the creature convulsed. The air exploded with light, then darkness, then silence. When the smoke cleared, the ravine was empty. The doorway still stood, but the glow had gone. Only faint embers remained in the cracks of the stone. "Is it gone?" Scorpius whispered. Hermione shook her head. "No, not gone, just deeper." Harry looked toward the heart of the forest, now quiet once more. The air felt still, too still. Whatever they had awoken had not vanished. It had merely sunk beneath the earth again, waiting, and far beneath their feet, in darkness that no wand light could reach, the keeper stirred. It had seen the boy who carried the blood of its jailers. It had felt the touch of the ancient moonlight once more. And as it dreamed in the deep, the roots of the forest whispered a name. Albus Potter. For several days, Hogwarts stood under a strange silence. The students felt it in the air, a stillness that seemed to weigh upon the walls and echo through the halls. Lessons were taught, meals were eaten, but a quiet dread had settled over all. Even the portraits whispered in hushed tones when the forest was mentioned. The forbidden forest, once merely a shadowed mystery beyond the gates, now loomed like a living thing, vast and watchful. Harry kept his wand close at all times. Sleep had become a rare companion. When it came, it brought dreams of green fire and whispering roots. Each morning he would wake with the scent of earth in his nostrils, as if he had been walking the forest paths in his sleep. In the staff room, the others fared little better. Hermione pored over books until her eyes ached, and Ron, ever restless, patrolled the castle grounds nightly, wand ready. Neville reported the plants in the greenhouses had begun to wither, their leaves blackening from within despite the strongest restoration charms. "It's spreading," he said grimly. "Whatever's poisoning the forest is reaching beyond it." Harry nodded. "Then we need to go back," he said. "We can't wait for it to come to us." Hermione hesitated. "Last time it nearly destroyed you. The creature's corrupted magic is older than even our strongest spells. We need more knowledge before we face it again." But Albus, who had been listening silently near the window, spoke up. "It knows me now," he said. "It said my name in my dreams. Maybe it's trying to tell me something." Harry turned sharply. "You've been dreaming about it again?" Albus nodded. "Every night. It's not angry, not like before. It's sad, like it wants to be free, but something's holding it down." Hermione leaned forward. "That might mean the corruption isn't complete. There's still something pure within it, fighting to surface. Then we can save it," Harry said quietly. That night they set out once more. Harry, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Albus, and Scorpius. The moon hung low and swollen, draping the forest in ghostly light. A chill mist coiled between the trees as they entered the shadowed expanse. Every sound seemed louder in the hush. The snap of a twig, the soft flutter of wings, the distant hoot of an owl. As they advanced, they found signs of change everywhere. Trees had twisted into grotesque shapes, their bark streaked with black veins that pulsed faintly. The ground beneath their feet was soft, spongy, and faintly warm, as if the forest itself were alive and fevered. Neville crouched beside a fallen log. "The rot's spreading faster than I feared. Look, this wood's still alive, but it's being drained from within." "The Keeper's corruption," Hermione murmured. "It's feeding off the forest's magic." They pressed deeper until they reached the ravine again. The great stone doorway still stood at its center, but the glow that once surrounded it had returned, brighter, fiercer, more unstable. Harry stepped forward, wand raised. "Stay behind me." The runes flared as he approached, and a low rumble echoed from within the earth. Then, without warning, the ground split open. Roots as thick as serpents lashed upward, wrapping around the stones. The air filled with a deep, rhythmic pulse, the heartbeat of the forest. A voice rose from the fissure, no longer mournful, but angry and wild. "You seek to free what cannot be freed." The forest came alive. Trees groaned, their branches stretching toward the intruders. Shadows moved with purpose, darting between trunks. From the darkness came shapes, creatures once peaceful, now twisted by the corruption. Wolves with eyes like green fire, centaurs whose gazes were blank with rage, even the air itself shimmering with dark enchantment. "Defensive line!" Harry shouted. He cast a shield charm just as a branch struck, shattering against invisible glass. Hermione's wand blazed with blue light, sending protective waves rippling through the clearing. Ron hurled a spell that burst into flame, driving back the corrupted beasts. Amid the chaos, Albus felt something calling to him from beyond the doorway. A whisper, faint but urgent, threaded through the roar. He turned, stepping toward it, despite the shouts behind him. "Albus!" Harry cried, but the boy had already crossed the threshold. Inside the doorway was darkness, cold and deep. The whisper grew louder, clearer. It was not the keeper's voice, it was something else, older, softer, like a memory. "Child of light, the roots remember your blood." Albus reached out his hand. For an instant, the darkness before him shimmered, and he saw visions, a vast green land filled with life, towering trees that glowed with starlight, a figure made of silver and leaves, standing at its heart, watching over all. Then the image shattered, replaced by fire, black vines and screams. The voice returned, pained. "I was protector. Now I am prisoner. Free me from the rot." Albus gasped as green fire flared around him. Harry forced his way through the writhing vines, dragging his son back just as the light erupted, sending shock waves through the clearing. The creatures retreated, howling as the forest quaked around them. When the dust settled, the doorway stood, silent again. But something had changed. The glow was dimmer, steadier, as though the storm within had lessened. Hermione hurried to Albus's side. "What happened in there?" Albus's voice trembled. "It showed me what it was before, what it lost. The darkness isn't its own. It's coming from something else, something buried under the forest." Harry exchanged a look with Hermione. "Then we need to find the source," he said, "before the forest dies completely." They left the ravine as dawn broke pale over the treetops. The storm had passed, but the air was still heavy with unease. As they stepped back onto open ground, a single beam of sunlight pierced the clouds, falling across the forest edge. For the first time in days, the birds began to sing again, but far beneath their feet, in the hidden depths of the forest, ancient roots stirred restlessly. The keeper slept once more, but the corruption, older than Hogwarts itself, still pulsed in the dark. And somewhere deep below, a second voice whispered, faint as breath, "The seal will not hold." The earth trembled once, then stilled, as if waiting. The next few days passed in a haze of tension and restless waiting. Though lessons continued, though laughter still echoed faintly in the corridors, everyone at Hogwarts could sense the shift that had taken hold. The forest no longer merely brooded beyond the gates, it watched. Its edge, once peaceful, now seemed darker, as if the trees themselves leaned inward, listening to every sound that drifted from the castle. Harry had forbidden all students from going near the forest, though that did little to quiet the rumors spreading through the halls. Some said a dragon had made its lair there. Others whispered that Voldemort's ghost had returned. None guessed the truth, that something older than the school itself was stirring beneath the earth. Late one evening, in the candlelit silence of the library, Hermione traced her finger along a brittle parchment, eyes narrowing as she read. "Here," she whispered to Harry, who stood beside her. "This record was written by Helga Hufflepuff herself. Notes from before the forest was sealed. She speaks of a sickness born from beyond the veil, something that corrupted the guardian from within." "Beyond the veil?" Harry murmured. "As in the veil in the Department of Mysteries?" Hermione nodded slowly. "Perhaps not the same, but similar magic. Something that leaks between worlds. Whatever infected the Keeper might not have come from our realm at all." Ron groaned softly from his seat nearby. Brilliant. So now we're not just dealing with cursed roots, but with magic from another world. Not another world, Hermione corrected. Another plane, a place between life and death, where old magic sleeps. Harry's thoughts darkened. If that's true, then the corruption might not just be affecting the forest. It could spread through the ley lines that feed Hogwarts itself. They looked toward the tall windows where the moonlight gleamed on the glass. The thought hung between them, heavy and unspoken. If Hogwarts's foundations were tied to that same ancient magic, then whatever was festering below the forest could reach the castle before long. That night, Harry dreamed again of the Keeper. It stood before him in a twilight glade, neither shadow nor flesh. Its form shifted like smoke through trees. The forest weakens, it said. The heart is bound by rot, not its own. Free me, or all will wither. When Harry woke, his scar, long dormant, burned faintly, though he knew this magic was no echo of Voldemort's. It was older, deeper, something woven into the world itself. At dawn, he sent word to McGonagall. By midday, the staff gathered once more in her office. Hermione, Ron, Neville, and even Hagrid, who had not left the forest's edge in days. Albus and Scorpius stood beside them, pale but determined. The corruption is coming from deeper beneath the forest, Hermione explained. There's a network of roots and tunnels down there, older than the school. If the Keeper's bound to that place, that's where we'll find the source. McGonagall's lips tightened. You mean to go down there? We have to, Harry said. If we don't, the forest will die, and the magic that feeds Hogwarts with it. McGonagall's gaze lingered on him a long moment, then softened. Then take care. The school has survived 1,000 years. I won't see it fall now. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, they gathered their supplies. Wands, enchanted lanterns, protective charms, even potions brewed by Hermione herself. The forest awaited, silent and dark. When they entered, the world seemed to hold its breath. The trees loomed like towering sentinels, their leaves whispering secrets to one another. The deeper they went, the colder it grew, until frost shimmered faintly on the undergrowth, though it was not winter. After an hour's walk, they reached a grove Harry had never seen before. It was a ring of ancient oaks, their trunks twisted together to form a natural archway. At its center lay a great fissure in the ground, wide enough for a man to climb through, from which a faint blue mist rose. Hermione's voice trembled as she spoke. This must be it, the passage to the roots of the forest. Hagrid muttered a quiet prayer, gripping his crossbow. If we going down there, best not look back. Harry went first, lowering himself carefully through the narrow opening. The others followed, their lanterns sending ripples of light across the damp stone. The air was cool and heavy, carrying the scent of moss and something ancient, something that felt alive. The tunnel wound downward, twisting like a serpent. Runes glimmered faintly on the walls, the same as those on the stone doorway they had seen before, though these were dull and cracked. As they descended, the light dimmed until even their lanterns struggled to pierce the gloom. At last the passage widened into a vast cavern. The sight that met their eyes stole their breath. They stood before an enormous underground chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center rose a great tree, its trunk blackened, its branches twisted and gnarled, its roots plunging deep into the stone floor. From its bark, oozed streams of dark green light that flowed like liquid down into the earth. "The heart of the forest," Hermione whispered. "It's dying." Neville approached slowly, eyes wide with awe and sorrow. "I can feel it. Every living thing in the forest is bound to this tree." Suddenly the roots stirred, and a deep voice filled the cavern. "Why do you come here, children of men?" The air shimmered, and from the shadows, the keeper emerged once more, its vast form half spirit, half shadow. Yet this time it was weaker. The light within its chest flickered, and pieces of its form drifted away like smoke. "We're here to save you," Harry said, "to free you from the corruption." The keeper's eyes burned brighter. "You cannot free what is already bound. The rot below feeds upon me. It awakens when I sleep." "The rot below?" Hermione asked quickly. "What is it?" The creature's gaze turned downward. "A wound, a breach between worlds. Long ago something slipped through, a shadow from beyond the veil. The founders sealed it, but their seal is dying." A tremor rippled through the cavern, and the great tree groaned. Cracks split across its trunk, green light spilling forth. From the shadows below came a low hiss, like breath drawn through teeth. Harry raised his wand. "Get back!" The ground erupted. Black vines shot upward, writhing and twisting, their tips glowing with green fire. They lashed at the group, striking sparks where they met wand light. Hermione's spells blazed blue and gold. Ron shouted curses into the storm. Neville flung enchanted seeds that exploded in bursts of light, but still the vines came. The keeper cried out, its voice shaking the cavern. "It rises! The corruption breaks free!" From beneath the roots came a shape, a dark mass, shifting and writhing like liquid shadow. Eyes opened within it, countless and gleaming. A voice rose deeper than the earth itself. "All life is mine. The roots remember." Harry felt a coldness pierce his chest. This was no creature. This was a force, pure corruption, ancient and hungry. "Run!" he shouted. But Albus stood his ground. The same silver light that had once burned in the vial of moonfern began to glow from his wand. He raised it high, and the light surged, meeting the darkness with a blinding flash. The cavern shook. The vines recoiled. The keeper turned its face toward the boy. "The blood of the founders renews the vow." The light burst outward, swallowing the chamber in brilliance. Then all went still. When the radiance faded, the vines had retreated. The keeper knelt beside the dying tree, its form flickering. Harry gathered Albus into his arms. The boy was pale but breathing, the light gone from his wand. "It's not over," the keeper whispered. "The breach remains. The rot sleeps, for now." They looked around the chamber. The great tree still stood, but its light burned faintly once more. The air smelled of ash and rain. Hermione met Harry's gaze. "We've bought time," she said softly, "but the true battle hasn't yet begun." Far above, through the layers of stone and soil, the forbidden forest lay silent under a shroud of mist. Yet in its depths, the roots whispered like restless dreams, and somewhere below, something vast turned in its slumber, waiting to rise again. A pale dawn broke over the castle the next morning, but its light brought no comfort. The forbidden forest lay wrapped in mist, the treetops trembling as though a great wind moved within, though the air on the grounds was still. From the highest towers of Hogwarts, faint streaks of green light could still be seen, flickering among the shadows, like distant embers that refused to die. Harry stood upon the battlements, cloak stirring in the chill air, his mind heavy with what they had found beneath the roots. The keeper had survived, but so had the corruption. It was only sleeping. The thought filled him with dread. Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Hermione, her face pale from sleepless nights. "You saw it too," she said quietly, joining him at the wall. "The light's returning. The breach isn't sealed." Harry nodded. "We stopped it for now. But that thing, it's waiting. It called itself the rot beneath. It wants to spread, to consume everything that draws magic from the earth." Hermione's eyes darkened. "Then it will come for Hogwarts." Their words were soon proven true. That evening, strange phenomena began to spread through the castle. Candles flickered green without cause. Portraits shivered in their frames. The suits of armor along the corridors rattled and groaned, whispering words in languages long forgotten. In the greenhouses, Professor Longbottom found the mandrakes singing softly to one another in mournful tones, and the great whomping willow began to weep sap that glowed faintly under moonlight. Whatever was beneath the forest had begun to reach upward. By nightfall, Harry called an emergency meeting in the great hall. Professors, prefects, even ghosts gathered under the floating candles, which now burned with a sickly hue. McGonagall's voice carried through the silence. "You have all felt it. The forest's unrest has spread to the castle. We must act before the wards are broken." Hermione stepped forward, holding an ancient scroll. "The Founders built their wards on the same lines of magic that bind the Keeper. If the rot is rising through those lines, we can redirect it, but only by strengthening the original enchantments, and that means invoking the Founders' spells themselves." "Which none of us know," Ron said grimly. Hermione looked at him, her expression grave. "No, but their descendants might." Her gaze fell on Albus and Scorpius, who stood near the back. Albus swallowed hard. "You mean us?" Harry laid a hand on his son's shoulder. "You carry their legacy in your blood. Both of you. Albus from Gryffindor through me. Scorpius from Slytherin's line, however distant. The Founders' enchantments may still answer to that blood." Scorpius paled but straightened his shoulders. "Then we'll do it. Whatever it takes." The plan was set. At dawn, they would go once more into the forest, to the great tree at its heart. There, beneath its dying roots, the binding magic could be renewed or broken forever. That night, before they left, Albus sat awake in his dormitory. The castle was silent except for the wind sighing through the windows. A faint glow pulsed across the floorboards, green again but gentle, like breathing. He followed it to the corridor, where a figure stood half-shrouded in mist. It was the Keeper. Its form flickered like a shadow seen through water. Its voice was faint, like the rustle of leaves. "Child of the Founders, the forest remembers you." Albus stepped closer. "What do you want from me?" "To heal," the spirit said. "But healing demands sacrifice. The roots must drink of life to restore what was lost." "What do you mean?" But the Keeper was already fading, its voice like a whisper carried on the wind. "When the heart awakens, you will know." Then it was gone. At first light, the group assembled again at the edge of the forest. Mist clung to the ground like smoke. The centaurs stood at a distance, watching silently. Even they would not approach. Hagrid came to see them off, his great eyes glistening. "If ye find whatever's causing this, give it a good walloping from me," he said, forcing a smile. Harry managed a faint grin. "We'll do our best." The descent into the forest was different this time. The trees leaned inward, their branches intertwining like twisted arms, and the air shimmered faintly with green dust. Every now and then the ground would pulse, as if some enormous creature were breathing below the soil. At last they reached the ravine. The great tree loomed before them, its bark cracked, its glow faint but steady. Around it, the runes Hermione had redrawn still burned weakly. "This is where it begins," she said, unrolling the scroll. "We'll need the boys to stand within the circle. Their magic must flow through the wards as we recast them." Albus and Scorpius stepped forward without hesitation. The runes flared brighter beneath their feet, responding to their presence. Hermione raised her wand, chanting the words she had deciphered from the Founder's script. The sound echoed through the clearing, ancient and powerful. But as the final phrase left her lips, the ground split open once more. A rush of black mist poured out, thicker and more violent than before. From its depths came the voice of the corruption itself. "You cannot bind what was never meant to sleep." The forest erupted. The great tree groaned, its roots tearing free of the soil. Vines whipped through the air. The ground shook so violently that the others stumbled. Harry shouted over the noise, "Hold the spell! Don't stop!" Albus and Scorpius joined hands, their wands glowing with golden and silver light. Streams of power poured from them into the runes, weaving through Hermione's enchantment. The light met the darkness in a thunderclap that split the sky. Then, from within the chaos, the Keeper appeared, larger, brighter, yet trembling as though in pain. "The breach opens," it cried. "The veil thins, the rot awakens." A shape began to emerge from the roots, a vast, writhing shadow with countless tendrils and eyes that burned with sickly green fire. The air itself seemed to twist around it. Hermione's voice broke. "We're too late." "No," Harry said, stepping forward. "Not while we still stand." He raised his wand, channeling every ounce of strength he had left. "Expecto Patronum." The stag burst forth, brilliant and blinding. It charged into the darkness, colliding with the shadow in a blaze of white light. For a moment, the forest was filled with radiance, so pure it seemed the world itself might shatter. Then silence fell. When the light faded, the shadow was gone. The tree stood still once more, its bark no longer blackened, though the green glow had dimmed to a faint heartbeat. The Keeper knelt before them, its voice weary but peaceful. "You have done what even the Founders could not. The forest breathes again." Albus staggered, and Harry caught him before he fell. The boy was pale, trembling, but alive. Hermione turned slowly, scanning the clearing. "The breach. It's closed." But the Keeper's eyes dimmed as it faded back into mist. "For now. But know this, the veil between worlds weakens. What sleeps beneath may stir again. Guard the roots well, children of Hogwarts." Then it was gone, and the clearing fell silent except for the slow sigh of the wind. They stood there for a long time, gazing at the restored forest, feeling the pulse of life returning around them. For the first time in weeks, the air smelled of rain and earth again, not of decay. Harry looked at his son, who was watching the trees sway gently above. "You did it," he said softly. Albus shook his head. "We did it, all of us." The path back to the castle felt longer than ever, but when they emerged from the trees, dawn was breaking, bright and gold, washing the world in light. For now, the danger had passed. And yet, as they turned back for one last look at the forest, Harry thought he saw something stir among the roots. A A flicker of darkness deep and faint, like a shadow taking breath. The forest slept again, but not in peace. Though calm had returned to Hogwarts, it was the uneasy calm of a battlefield. After smoke has cleared, the forbidden forest stood silent once more, yet all who looked upon it sensed that its silence was not rest, but watchfulness. The great oaks no longer wept sap, nor trembled with dark light, but their stillness carried a strange weight, as though they listened for the faintest echo of what had transpired beneath their roots. The days that followed were bright and deceptively peaceful. Students returned to their studies, lessons resumed, and laughter began to fill the corridors again. Yet those who had walked into the forest knew better. A shadow had passed over the land, and though its form was gone, its mark remained. Harry often found himself staring out from his classroom window, eyes drawn unconsciously toward the distant tree line. His scar no longer burned, but his heart did, burdened by the thought that the danger might only be sleeping. Hermione, ever the scholar, threw herself into research once more, searching ancient records and forgotten tomes for any mention of breaches between worlds. Ron pretended cheerfulness, but every evening his gaze drifted toward the forbidden forest, and he would mutter, "It's too quiet, mate, much too quiet." Even Hagrid seemed troubled. He came to see Harry one morning, his huge hands twisting his moleskin cap. "The creatures ain't themselves," he said gravely. "The centaurs have moved their camps to the far edge of the forest. The unicorns are restless, and even the spiders have gone deeper underground. They say the forest feels hollow." "Hollow?" Harry echoed. "Aye," said Hagrid, eyes darkening, "like there's a hole where something important used to be." Harry felt a cold prickle along his spine. Could it be that in driving out the corruption they had torn away a piece of the forest's very soul? That evening, as twilight gathered over the grounds, Albus sat alone by the lake. The water mirrored the purple sky, smooth as glass, and the distant outline of the forest seemed to waver in the reflection. Scorpius joined him quietly, sitting cross-legged beside him. "You keep coming here," Scorpius said. "Why?" Albus didn't answer at first. His eyes remained fixed on the dark line of trees. "Because it's not over," he said finally. "I can feel it. It's like a whisper at the back of my mind. Something calling from beneath." "You think the keeper's still there?" Albus nodded slowly. "It's alive. I can feel its pain." Scorpius frowned, uneasy. "You sound like my father when he talks about cursed objects. Maybe you should—" But before he could finish, a sudden ripple spread across the lake's surface. The boys froze. The moon had just begun to rise, its silver light spilling over the water, and where it touched, faint green lines shimmered like veins. "What is that?" Scorpius whispered. The lines glowed brighter, spreading outward in a slow pulse. Then a voice, faint and distant, drifted on the wind. "The roots reach farther than you know." The sound faded as quickly as it came. The light vanished, leaving only the soft lap of water against the shore. The next morning, Harry found them in the great hall, pale and silent. When they told him what they had seen, he felt the same cold certainty he had carried since that night beneath the earth. The corruption had not been destroyed, only displaced. Later that day, Hermione burst into his office, parchment in hand, her eyes alight with grim realization. "I found it," she said breathlessly. "The breach we sealed. It was only one of many. The Founder's writings speak of a network of veins running beneath Britain itself, channels of ancient magic. Hogwarts stands at their heart, but the lines stretch outward to forests, lakes, and mountains. If the rot has taken root in one of them, Harry finished for her, then the forest isn't the only place in danger. Ron entered moments later, his face pale. "We've got another problem. Neville just sent word from the greenhouses. The soil's dying. It's as if something's draining the life right out of it." They exchanged grim looks. The forest's sickness was spreading again. That night, thunder rolled across the mountains. The sky above the castle burned with lightning, and rain fell in sheets. In the courtyard, water pooled in silver mirrors, and within those reflections, faint glimmers of green flickered once more. Harry and Hermione met at the base of the astronomy tower. "The ley lines," she said over the roar of the storm. "They're reawakening, and something's moving through them." "We need to trace where it's going," Harry said. "If it's left the forest, it must have found another source of magic to feed on." Lightning struck the lake, lighting it like molten glass. For a heartbeat, they saw the veins of green light running beneath the water, branching outward like the roots of a vast, unseen tree. "The lake," Harry whispered. The next morning they stood at its edge once more. The surface was still and gray, reflecting the low clouds. Hagrid joined them, carrying a coil of rope. "If it's down there," he said grimly, "we'll have to go after it." Neville arrived with several small vials of potion. "Gillyweed," he said. "You'll need it." Moments later they descended into the depths. The water grew darker as they swam, lantern charms casting soft halos of light. Schools of fish darted away, and long strands of kelp drifted like hair in the current. At the bottom lay the remains of old structures, stone pillars from forgotten times, their surfaces carved with the same runes they had seen in the forest. Hermione pointed ahead. A faint light glimmered beneath a curtain of weeds, pulsing softly. They pushed through, and there it was, a great rift in the lake bed, glowing with green fire. The same corruption that had poisoned the forest now seeped from the deep. "It's spreading through the ley lines," Hermione said, voice trembling through the bubbles, "feeding on the world's magic." Suddenly the light surged. The current tore at them, dragging them toward the fissure. Shapes moved within it, shadows whispering and writhing. Harry reached for Hermione, pulling her back, but a voice echoed through the water, clear and terrible. "The heart cannot be sealed. The root cannot die." Then came the roar, a sound that seemed to shake the very bones of the lake. From the fissure burst a torrent of energy, throwing them upward toward the surface. They broke through the water, gasping for air as lightning split the sky above. The storm raged around them. The lake churned violently, waves crashing against the shore. Harry dragged himself to the bank, coughing, while Hermione collapsed beside him, soaked and trembling. "It's awake," she whispered. "Whatever lies beneath, it's no longer bound." From the depths of the lake, the green light flared once more, brighter than ever before, casting long shadows across the grounds. The students who looked from their windows that night would later say the lake had glowed like an emerald flame, and that for a moment, the reflection of Hogwarts in its waters had trembled, as if the castle itself were afraid. Far below the waves, unseen, the roots of the forest stretched out into the dark, and through them, something vast and ancient began to move. When dawn broke over the castle, it brought no warmth. The clouds hung low, swollen and gray, casting the grounds into a half-light that seemed caught between night and day. The forbidden forest lay still, but the black lake was not. Ripples shuddered across its surface as though some great creature moved below, unseen. From the highest tower, the lake gleamed faintly green, and faint waves of magic pulsed from it like the slow beating of a heart. Harry stood upon the shore with Hermione, Ron, and Neville. None spoke for a long time. Even the wind held its breath. The night before had proved what they all feared. The corruption had not been contained. It had merely fled to the water, spreading its shadow beneath the castle itself. "It's changing," Hermione murmured, her eyes scanning the surface. "The ley lines must run through the lake bed." The keeper said the roots spread across the land. Perhaps the water is another path. Ron kicked at a stone, sending it skimming once before it vanished into the green ripples. Great. First haunted forests, now cursed lakes. What's next? Possessed pumpkins? But Harry didn't smile. He was watching the water closely, his eyes narrowing. For a moment, he could have sworn he saw something move just beneath the surface, a faint outline, pale and long, gliding through the depths. "There's something down there," he said quietly. That evening, McGonagall summoned them all to her office. She had aged in those days, her sharp gaze shadowed with worry. "I have felt disturbances in the wards," she said without preamble. "The very stones of Hogwarts are growing restless. Doors lock themselves, the staircases shift without command, the castle feels alive." Hermione frowned. Alive or infected? McGonagall's lips tightened. Perhaps both. Harry stepped forward. If the lake is connected to the ley lines, then whatever is spreading from beneath could soon reach the castle foundations. Hogwarts might be feeding it without realizing. Silence fell. The portraits along the walls stirred uneasily. In one frame, the portrait of Phineas Nigellus muttered darkly, "I told you long ago that meddling with ancient magic would be the ruin of us all." McGonagall's gaze softened. "Then tell me, Mr. Potter, what do you propose we do?" Harry took a slow breath. "We go back down. Deeper. There has to be a way to reach the heart of this corruption before it spreads any farther." Hermione nodded. "The founders must have known of it. There's a chamber somewhere beneath the lake, connected to the school's oldest enchantments. If we can find it, we might find a way to stop this." Ron groaned softly. "Please don't tell me this is going to be another one of those secret chambers beneath Hogwarts stories." Hermione's smile was grim. "It always is." The next morning, under a veil of thick mist, they gathered once more at the lake's edge. Harry, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Albus, and Scorpius. Hagrid waited nearby, Fang pressed close to his leg, refusing to go near the water. "You lot be careful," Hagrid said, voice low. "The merfolk have been acting strange. They're singing again. Songs I ain't heard since the Tri-Wizard days. Something's calling to 'em." Harry gripped his friend's arm. "We'll be careful. Keep the students inside the castle no matter what happens." They took Gillyweed once more and slipped into the cold depths. The world above vanished, replaced by green dimness and drifting silence. The lake stretched vast around them, its murky depths hiding old secrets, the remains of ships, statues of long-dead merfolk kings, and faint glimmers of light that seemed to move of their own accord. They swam deeper, lantern charms glowing faintly through the gloom. Schools of fish scattered at their approach. A shadow passed overhead, something massive, slow, and ancient, but when they looked up, there was only darkness. Then they saw it, a great archway carved into the lake bed, its stones covered in runes that pulsed with the same sickly green light as the forest's roots. It looked impossibly old, older even than Hogwarts itself. Beyond it, a tunnel sloped downward into blackness. Hermione's voice echoed through the water, muffled by their spell work. That must be it, the Founder's lower sanctum. They entered. The passage twisted downward, walls slick with algae that glowed faintly under their light. The deeper they went, the warmer the water became until the very air seemed to hum with power. Then suddenly they emerged into a vast, air-filled cavern. They broke the surface, gasping. Torches flickered along the walls, burning with green fire. The chamber was immense, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls engraved with the sigils of the four founders: Gryffindor's lion, Ravenclaw's eagle, Hufflepuff's badger, and Slytherin's serpent, each encircling a single enormous rune carved into the floor. "The seal of unity," Hermione whispered, "the Founder's final enchantment. It ties Hogwarts together. It's the heart of the castle's magic." As they stepped closer, the rune began to glow. The serpent flared brightest, its light turning cold and emerald. A low rumble filled the air. The ground beneath them trembled. Then a voice echoed through the chamber, not one but many, blending into a single resonant tone. "The binding weakens, the rot hungers." A fissure tore open at the center of the rune. From it spilled black mist, thick and writhing. Shadows poured forth, forming shapes, faces half-remembered memories of pain and fury. "Back!" Harry shouted. "Don't let it touch you!" They cast their spells, light clashing against darkness. But for every shadow they banished, two more rose in its place. The air reeked of damp earth and old death. Hermione cried out as one of the shades brushed her arm, leaving frost in its wake. Then from the fissure, something vast began to rise, a shape like a serpent, made of roots and smoke, its eyes burning with cold fire. It towered over them, scales formed of living bark, its voice shaking the cavern. "I am the root and the ruin. I am the hunger beneath." It lunged. Spells burst through the air, but they passed through it like wind. The creature's body coiled around the chamber pillars, tightening. The stones groaned. "We can't fight it," Ron shouted. "We got to seal it." Hermione's eyes flashed. "The seal of unity. If we can restore the runes—" Harry understood at once. He turned to Albus and Scorpius. "You know what to do." The boys nodded. Albus raised his wand toward the lion's rune, Scorpius to the serpent's. Their light joined, bright gold and pale silver meeting in a surge that lit the whole cavern. Hermione traced the eagle and the badger, completing the circle. The air screamed. The serpent's shadow thrashed, its form twisting and burning as the runes blazed. "You cannot bind what is born of the void," it roared. But the light only grew stronger. The seal closed, the fissure shrinking, the shadows drawn back into the earth like water into sand. The serpent's final scream faded into silence, and then there was nothing. Only the echo of their breathing and the faint hum of restored magic. They stood together in the stillness. The green light was gone. The runes glowed faint gold, steady and whole once more. "It's done," Hermione whispered. Harry looked around the vast chamber. For now, far above in the waters of the lake, the ripples stilled. The storm clouds parted. Sunlight spilled over the grounds once more. Yet as it touched the forest beyond, the trees did not sway. Deep among their roots, something faint and unseen stirred, like the echo of a heartbeat that refused to die. The morning that followed their return from the depths of the lake dawned bright and clean, with a chill wind sweeping through the castle courtyards. Sunlight spilled through the high windows, glimmering across the suits of armor and the polished marble floors. To the students of Hogwarts, it seemed as though the strange season of fear had passed at last. The forest no longer moaned at night, the lake no longer glowed, and even the portraits had ceased their whispering. Yet for those who knew what had stirred beneath the world, peace did not come so easily. Harry awoke before dawn each day, walking the grounds alone. The trees of the forbidden forest stood dark and still against the silver horizon, and though their branches no longer moved of their own accord, he sometimes thought he could feel them watching him. Each time he passed the black lake, its waters lay mirror smooth, but there were mornings when faint rings would ripple outward from no visible source, as though something deep below were breathing. Hermione had buried herself once again in research, though her work had turned less frantic and more cautious. In the staff room, she and Neville pored over ancient tomes, their margins filled with curling Latin and strange runes. "It isn't gone," she told Harry one afternoon. "I've read enough to know that magic like that never simply disappears. The breach may be sealed, but the corruption's essence could remain dormant, waiting for the right kind of magic to stir it again." Ron, sitting nearby with his feet on the table, muttered, "That's comforting, isn't it? We've got a sleeping monster under the lake, just biding its time for a proper wake-up call." Hermione shot him a glare, but didn't argue. Albus and Scorpius had become quiet since their last descent. Their courage had been tested beyond anything the school could teach, and though they had returned alive, they carried something of that deep place in their eyes. Sometimes Albus would pause in the corridors as if listening to something only he could hear. When asked, he always smiled and said it was nothing, but Harry knew that look too well. One evening, as a storm gathered over the hills, father and son walked the path that wound along the lake's edge. The air smelled of rain, and thunder rolled distantly across the mountains. "You still feel it, don't you?" Harry asked at last. Albus hesitated before answering. "Sometimes, yes. Not like before. It's not angry anymore, just lonely, like it's waiting for someone to remember it." Harry looked out across the dark water, troubled. The Keeper, perhaps, or something older still. A flash of lightning split the clouds, its reflection dancing across the lake. In that fleeting light, Harry thought he saw a shape, vast and shadowed, moving beneath the surface. When the thunder came, the water was still once more. That night, the castle shook. The tremor was brief, but strong enough to rattle the windows and send books tumbling from shelves. Students woke in fright, rushing to the corridors. Professors lit their wands, voices calling through the darkness. In the great hall, the enchanted ceiling flickered wildly, stars shivering as if the very sky had cracked. By dawn, the shaking had stopped, but the calm that followed was worse. The black lake had turned the color of ink, reflecting nothing. Its surface no longer mirrored the castle, and when Hagrid tried to row out upon it, the oars met heavy resistance, as if the water had thickened. "The ley lines," Hermione said grimly as they met in her office that morning. "The energy's shifting again. Whatever we sealed below may be struggling to escape, or something else is pushing from beyond." McGonagall summoned them all that evening to her study. The portraits of the former headmasters leaned close, their faces grave. "The wards of the castle are faltering once more," the headmistress said. "I have spent the day restoring them, but something pulls against the very foundation of Hogwarts. This place has withstood war, fire, and time itself, yet now it groans like an old tree in a storm." Harry glanced toward the window, where the first drops of rain streaked the glass. "The same storm as before," he murmured. "It's not weather, it's magic." As if in answer, thunder cracked overhead, shaking the room. The candles flared green before snuffing out. For a heartbeat, darkness swallowed everything. Then came a whisper, not loud but clear enough for all to hear. "The heart remembers." The torches reignited, and all eyes turned to Harry. "Whatever this is," he said, "it's calling to the castle through the ley lines. If we can't cut its connection, it will consume the wards, and Hogwarts with them." Hermione stepped forward. "Then we must strike at its source. The seal of unity held it once. We can strengthen it again, but this time from above. The founders tied their magic not only to the chamber below, but to the castle's very stones. Each tower, each hall is part of that enchantment." McGonagall nodded. "Then let us defend our home, as they once did." That night, a storm unlike any in living memory fell upon Hogwarts. Lightning speared the turrets, rain battered the windows. The students were gathered in the great hall, huddled beneath protective charms as the staff worked to anchor the wards. The walls hummed faintly with power, the air charged with the scent of magic and ozone. On the highest tower, Harry stood with Hermione and Albus, the wind whipping at their robes. Beneath them, the lake churned wildly, great waves crashing against the shore. The green glow had returned, stronger, angrier, burning through the water like veins of fire. "The breach is open again," Hermione cried over the wind. "It's drawing power from the castle itself." Harry raised his wand. "Then we cut it off." Together they began the incantation, ancient words drawn from the founders' own magic, their voices rising above the storm. The tower blazed with light. From every window of Hogwarts, beams of color burst forth, red, blue, yellow, and green, spiraling upward into a single pillar of brilliance that struck the clouds. For a moment the world held its breath. Then the light plunged downward, driving into the heart of the Black Lake. The water exploded outward in a roaring column, and from its depths came a sound like 1,000 voices crying as one. The wind howled, the lightning faltered. When it ended, silence fell. The storm broke, the rain stopped. The lake lay still once more, its surface smooth and silver beneath the moonlight. The glow was gone. The air smelled clean again. No trace of the rot, no whisper of corruption. They stood together, drenched and exhausted, watching as the clouds drifted apart. Hermione smiled faintly. "I think we've done it." Harry nodded, but his gaze remained fixed on the water below. "For now," he said quietly. And as the first stars returned to the sky, deep in the stillness of the lake, something vast shifted once more, slow and patient, like a heartbeat in slumber. The castle above stood strong and gleaming, unaware that beneath its reflection the darkness had not been destroyed, only dreaming. The days that followed the storm were filled with a strange, uneasy peace. The sky above Hogwarts cleared to a deep, brilliant blue, and the castle glimmered in the sunlight as if it had been newly washed by the heavens. The lake was calm again, a mirror of silver glass, and the forbidden forest whispered softly, its branches stirring with the wind like a sigh of relief. And yet, for all the calm that had returned, Harry could not rest. He felt it still, the faint pulse beneath the ground, a rhythm too deep to hear, but always there like a heartbeat beneath the soil. It was not evil now, nor corrupted. It was something older, vast, and waiting. He walked the grounds often, speaking little. The students whispered when they saw him, saying that Professor Potter could see things others could not. Perhaps they were right. Hermione had turned once again to her endless reading, scouring the archives for fragments of ancient spells and lost histories. She spent her nights by candlelight, parchment spread before her like a battlefield. "Magic that old doesn't simply fade," she said one evening when Harry came to see her. "It changes form. The keeper may have vanished, but something has taken its place, something bound to the balance of the forest and the lake. I think Hogwarts itself may be becoming part of that balance." Harry frowned. "You mean the castle's alive?" Hermione smiled faintly, but her eyes held no humor. Perhaps it always was. Ron, though less given to study, felt the strangeness as well.
"I swear the armor in the West Corridor nodded at me the other day," he said grimly over breakfast. "Could have been my imagination. But then again, this place has a bad habit of proving me right." Even the ghosts seemed changed. The Bloody Baron drifted more often near the windows that faced the forest, and the Grey Lady was seen weeping in silence over the lake. Nearly headless Nick, usually eager for conversation, confessed that the castle's very air had grown too full of whispers, too crowded with memories. But it was Albus who felt it most. Since the storm, he had been distant, though not withdrawn. He attended lessons, smiled when spoken to, but there was a shadow in his gaze, something deep and reflective. At night he would go to the astronomy tower and watch the moonlight spill over the forbidden forest, his wand resting loosely in his hand. One evening, as the moon hung bright above the treetops, he heard it again, the voice that had haunted his dreams since the day they sealed the breach. "Child of the Founders, the bond is not broken." He turned sharply, but the tower was empty. Only the wind stirred. Yet the voice continued, not aloud but within him, resonant as if spoken by the earth itself. "The roots of magic do not die. They grow, they seek, they remember." "What are you?" Albus whispered. The answer came like a breath of wind across stone. "I am what remains." The next day, he told his father. Harry listened without interrupting, though unease tightened his jaw. "You're sure it wasn't a dream?" he asked finally. Albus nodded. "It wasn't the keeper's voice. It was calmer, older." Hermione looked up from her notes. "The Founders wrote of something they called the deep magic, a force that existed before wands, before spells. The keeper may have been its servant. If that force has awakened again." Harry's gaze drifted toward the window where the sunlight gleamed off the lake. "Then it may not be our enemy," he said softly. "Perhaps it's something we're meant to protect." That night, without telling the others, Albus returned to the forest. He walked beneath the silver canopy, guided by instinct more than sight. The path wound between ancient oaks, and though the air was still, the leaves rustled as if whispering to one another. The moonlight broke through the branches, painting the ground in shifting light. He found himself at the glade where the runes still faintly marked the soil. The old circle, once pulsing with corruption, now shimmered softly with silver light. The forest around it seemed to breathe. "I know you're here," he
he said into the stillness, and from the shadows, a form began to take shape. Not the monstrous figure of bark and flame that had once terrified him, but something gentler, a tall, luminous being woven of mist and light. Its eyes were like the heart of starlight. "You have come again," it said. Albus nodded slowly. "You're not the keeper." "No, the keeper returned to the earth. I am what followed. The forest needed a voice." Albus stepped closer. "Then tell me, what do you want from us?" "To be remembered," said the being. "When you sealed the breach, you restored balance. But balance demands guardianship. The magic that sleeps here must be guided, or it will turn to hunger again." "You mean it needs someone to protect it?" The being's gaze softened. "Someone to listen. Someone who understands both the old magic and the new." The light of its form flickered, growing faint. "The roots have chosen, Albus Potter. You carry the legacy of those who built this place. The magic has found you." Before he could reply, the figure dissolved into silver mist, and the glade fell silent once more. The runes glowed faintly at his feet, then faded. By morning, he was back in the castle. He said nothing of what he had seen, but there was a new calm in his manner. He spent his lessons quietly, spoke softly to the portraits, and walked the corridors with a strange assurance, as if hearing things no one else could. Harry noticed, of course. Fathers always do. But he said nothing either. Weeks passed, and the world outside turned to autumn. Leaves burned gold and scarlet along the hills, and the air grew crisp. The forest, once so dark and ominous, now glowed with color. The lake reflected it all, flames of red and gold upon silver water. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Harry, Hermione, Ron, and McGonagall stood together on the castle steps, watching the light fade. "The forest seems peaceful again," said McGonagall, her tone gentle for once. "Yes," Hermione said quietly, "for now." Ron folded his arms. "Let's not jinx it, eh?" Harry smiled faintly. "No, Ron, I think she's right. Whatever happens next, it won't be war. The forest isn't our enemy anymore." Far below by the lake's edge, Albus stood alone, his reflection mingling with that of the trees and sky. The wind moved softly through the reeds, carrying with it the faintest whisper, no longer a warning, but a song, low and ancient. The forest was no longer cursed nor haunted. It was alive. And as dusk deepened into night, the moon rose full above the towers of Hogwarts, shining down upon the forest and lake alike. Somewhere deep beneath their roots, the old magic stirred, not with hunger, but with harmony, and the castle above seemed to breathe in rhythm with the world around it. Peace, at last. But peace, like magic, is never forever. Winter crept slowly upon Hogwarts, as it always did, softly like a breath over the highlands. Frost silvered the windows. The forbidden forest glittered white at dawn, and the black lake froze in glassy silence, its surface reflecting the gray skies above. The castle, warm and glowing, from within stood like a beacon of gold in the midst of the cold. Students wrapped in scarves hurried through snow-dusted courtyards, their laughter carrying across the crisp air. Yet beneath the surface of this peace there lingered something quieter, deeper, a sense of waiting. The storms of autumn had passed, but the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind that sighed through the pine and oak felt laden with memory. Harry stood at the edge of the forest one morning, the hem of his cloak brushing snow. He had come alone, though the path before him was one he knew too well. The trees loomed vast and ancient, their trunks streaked with ice. The forbidden forest no longer frightened him as it once had. It was a place of mystery, not malice. Yet he felt its watchfulness still. He closed his eyes and listened. For a long moment there was nothing, only the creak of branches, the rustle of leaves. Then, faint as the whisper of wind, he heard it. The pulse beneath the ground, slow and steady. The heartbeat of the forest, still alive, still present. "Thank you," he murmured, though whether he spoke to the forest or to the ghost of the keeper, even he did not know. When he returned to the castle, Hermione was waiting for him in the staff room. A fire burned low in the hearth, and the air smelled faintly of parchment and cinnamon tea. She looked up from a stack of scrolls as he entered. "You've been walking the forest again," she said without looking up. "I couldn't stay away," he admitted. "It feels different now, quieter, almost grateful." Hermione smiled faintly. "That's because the balance is settled. The ancient magic is still there, but it's part of the land again. You can feel it because it's bound to Hogwarts now, as it always was meant to be." Harry took a seat opposite her, glancing at the parchment strewn across the table. "Still studying?" "I can't help it," she said, eyes bright. "These records are remarkable. The founders must have known that the forest's guardian wouldn't last forever."
There are hints, prophecies even, that one day the magic of the forest would pass into new hands. Harry frowned. New hands? Hermione hesitated. A guardian renewed. Someone who carries both the blood of magic and the will to protect it. Someone who listens to the old songs? Harry felt a chill, though the fire burned warmly. "You think that could be Albus?" Hermione didn't answer. She didn't have to. The weeks passed, and snow deepened upon the grounds. The castle glowed brighter than ever, filled with the laughter of students preparing for the holidays. For the first time in years, Hogwarts felt unburdened. Yet Albus Potter's dreams had grown strange again. He stood once more in the moonlit glade, surrounded by the circle of runes. The silver light of the moon shone upon the ground, and the forest whispered all around him. From the mist rose a figure, a tall silhouette woven of starlight and wind. Not the keeper, but something purer. "You've come far, child of the forest," it said, its voice like wind through leaves. Albus bowed his head. "I don't understand. What am I supposed to do?" "You already do," said the voice. "The forest no longer needs a warden of chains and fire. It needs a heart that listens. The magic of this world must be guarded by those who remember where it comes from." "And where does it come from?" The being's form flickered, its light dimming to a soft glow. "From all who have walked this earth with reverence, from those who have loved its beauty, its danger, its power. You, Albus Potter, are part of that magic now. The forest knows you. The roots will answer your call." When he woke, his pillow was damp with dew, and the faint scent of pine clung to his hair. The following morning dawned pale and cold, sunlight glinting off the snow. In the great hall, garlands of holly hung from the rafters, and the students' laughter echoed like bells. Yet Albus sat quietly beside Scorpius, his thoughts far away. "Still dreaming about the trees?" Scorpius asked softly. Albus smiled faintly. "Not the trees. The voice. It said the forest had chosen me." Scorpius looked at him askance. "Chosen you for what? To sprout leaves?" "Maybe," Albus said with a laugh that sounded too calm, too certain. "Maybe something like that." Later that day, when the sun began to sink behind the mountains, Harry found his son standing once more
at the edge of the forest. Snow fell in soft, silent flakes, clinging to his dark hair. The trees shimmered with frost, glowing faintly in the twilight. "Dreams again?" Harry asked. Albus nodded. "I think I understand them now." Harry stepped beside him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Tell me." Albus's eyes were distant, fixed on the deepening shadows between the trees. "It's not about fighting, Dad, or sealing things away. The forest doesn't want that anymore. It just wants to live, to grow without fear. The magic doesn't belong to us, but it needs us to keep it safe." Harry studied him quietly. In his son's face he saw not only Lily's eyes, but the calm strength of someone much older than his years. "You sound like your mother," he said softly. Albus smiled faintly. "She always said peace isn't about silence, it's about harmony." Together they watched as night fell fully and the forest came alive with quiet light. The snow shimmered faintly, and through the trees drifted motes of silver like floating embers. Somewhere deep within, a soft hum rose. Neither wind nor song, but something older, as if the forest itself were breathing a lullaby. That night, as the castle slept, Albus rose quietly from his bed. The moon was full, and its light spilled across the floor in silver ribbons. He walked down the corridor, silent as shadow, until he came to the main doors. They opened without a sound. The forest awaited. He stepped beneath the trees, his footprints soft in the snow. The cold did not bite him. The air felt warm, alive. As he entered the clearing, the runes flared once more, not green or sickly now, but gold, pure and steady. A gentle wind stirred the branches, and from it came the same voice he had heard before, soft and welcoming. "Welcome home, guardian." Albus smiled, lifting his wand. The light at its tip was no longer white but pale green, the color of new leaves in spring. The forest around him glowed in answer. The ancient magic that had once cursed these woods now breathed through him, through Hogwarts, through the land itself. The darkness had been conquered not by power, but by understanding. And so, the forbidden forest was forbidden no longer. When morning came, Harry found his son standing at the edge of the woods, watching the sunrise. The trees seemed to bow in the light, their branches glittering like glass. "It's beautiful," Harry said quietly. "It's alive," Albus replied, "and it always will be." From that day forth, Hogwarts thrived as it had not for centuries. The seasons turned, the students grew and learned, and the forest remained, a living heart of magic and memory. Yet those who listened carefully swore they could sometimes hear soft voices in the wind, speaking in tones older than language, thanking the one who had restored their song. And somewhere deep beneath the roots, the spirit of the old keeper rested at last, dreaming of a forest reborn. Spring came to Hogwarts at last, rolling over the highlands in waves of green and gold. The snow melted from the mountains, and the black lake shone like a mirror beneath the sun. The forbidden forest, once a place of shadow and fear, now thrummed with new life. The trees had grown tall and full, their branches budding early, their leaves shimmering as if dusted with light. Even the air felt changed, warmer, sweeter, alive. And so the year turned, quietly, as all great changes do. The castle, too, seemed to hum with new energy. Stone that had once been cold to the touch now radiated a faint warmth. Vines crept higher along the walls, blooming with small white flowers that had not been seen in living memory. Students spoke of strange dreams filled with golden light and whispering trees. The The forest called to them, but not with fear, with curiosity. Harry walked its paths often now, no longer in secret, but as one visiting an old friend. The forest had accepted him. Where once it had growled and whispered, now it merely watched, its silence deep and patient. He would stop at the glade where the runes lay carved into the earth, faintly glowing beneath the moss, and he would remember. He often thought of the keeper, the shadow and the sorrow, the great eyes filled with pain. And though he knew it was gone, its form returned to the earth, its spirit at peace, he sometimes imagined that the wind which brushed through the leaves was its voice, soft and eternal. It was in that glade that Albus found him one afternoon. The young man had grown since that winter, not just in height, but in bearing. He carried himself differently now, quietly confident, as though he bore a secret that needed no words. "You come here often," Albus said, smiling faintly. Harry turned, returning the smile. "I could say the same of you." "The forest feels happy," Albus said after a pause. "It breathes differently now, like it's finally awake." Harry nodded. "You did that?" Albus looked down at the glowing runes, tracing one with the toe of his boot. "No, it was already trying to heal. I just listened." "That," said Harry softly, "was what it needed most." They stood together for a long while, watching the sunlight stream through the canopy. The air shimmered faintly, and from somewhere deep in the forest came a sound, a faint lilting melody, not sung by any voice, but by the forest itself. Hermione said later that week that the song had a magical resonance. "It's a sign of restoration," she told them over tea in her study. "When ancient magic rebalances itself, it releases energy," harmony made audible. Ron took a sip of his tea, frowning. "Harmony or not, I'll admit it's eerie. I walked past the forest last night, and the trees were glowing. Glowing, Hermione. Trees aren't supposed to glow." "They are when they're full of ancient, awakened magic," she said, unruffled. "You're looking at a wonder older than Hogwarts itself. The forest is no longer forbidden, it's sanctified." "Sanctified?" Ron repeated. "Right. Remind me to stay on its good side." Harry only smiled. "That would be wise." In the months that followed, small miracles began to appear around the grounds. The whomping willow ceased its thrashing and bloomed with silver leaves. Unicorns wandered close enough to the castle that students could see them grazing at dawn. The lake, once black and silent, now sparkled with light even in the moonless dark, and the merfolk sang songs of joy that echoed through the water like bells. Albus often went to the forest after lessons. Scorpius joined him sometimes, though he never lingered as long. "It's peaceful," Scorpius would admit, "but it feels like the trees are watching me." "They are," Albus would say, smiling. "But not the way you think. They're remembering." "Remembering what?" "What it means to be alive." When term ended and the students departed for the summer, the castle stood quiet once more. Yet it was not the quiet of emptiness, but of rest. The wind through the corridors was soft, carrying the scent of grass and flowers. The portraits in the great hall murmured to one another, their painted faces peaceful for the first time in many months. Harry remained for a while after the others left. He spent his mornings walking the grounds, his evenings by the lake, and his nights beneath the stars. Once, as he sat beneath the great oak near the shore, he heard footsteps behind him. It was McGonagall, her tartan cloak drawn close against the wind. "You've done well, Potter," she said. Hogwarts feels renewed. He smiled faintly. It wasn't me. Her eyes softened. It never is entirely. But it takes courage to stand where the world trembles. You've done that again and again. He looked back at the forest where light flickered faintly between the trees. I think the world is steadier now. For a time at least, she nodded. That's all any of us can ever give it, a time of peace. They stood together for a long while, watching the evening settle over the land. The sun dipped low, turning the sky to gold, and for a moment Hogwarts shone as though carved of light. That night, as Harry prepared to leave, he found Albus waiting for him by the gate. The boy's wand glowed softly at his side, casting a halo of green light on the stones. "Going home?" Albus asked. "For a while," said Harry, "though I think you've made your home here." Albus looked toward the forest, where faint sparks drifted like fireflies between the trees. "Maybe. The magic feels safe again. It'll take care of itself now." Harry placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "It will, and so will you." The two of them stood in silence, father and son, until the night wrapped the castle in its quiet embrace. Then, with a last glance toward the glowing forest, Harry turned and began the long walk down the road, the sound of his footsteps fading into the whisper of the wind. Behind him, the castle stood tall and bright against the horizon. The forbidden forest glimmered with hidden light, alive and eternal. The balance had been restored. But deep below the earth, beneath roots and stone and water, the ancient power slept, not in darkness, but in peace. It dreamed of the ages it had seen and the ones still to come, of Hogwarts standing proud above the land, of children who would one day walk its halls and whisper its legends anew. And in those dreams, the voice of the keeper lingered still, no longer a cry of warning, but a song of blessing. The forest endures. The heart remembers. And magic, like life, is never truly lost. Above, the moon rose over the turrets of the castle, its silver light spilling across the lake, the forest, and the sleeping school. All was calm, all was well, and in the quiet of that night, the ancient magic of Hogwarts smiled.